There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. Welcome to The Bleeders, a podcast and support group about book writing and publishing. I'm writer and podcaster Courtney, and each episode I'll bring you new conversations with authors, agents, and publishers about how to write and sell books. Today, our guest is Eleanor Whitney. She is the author of 3 books, Promote Your Book, Riot Woman, and Quit Your Day Job. In this interview, Eleanor shares a handful of crucial tips for how to promote your book, as well as her publishing philosophy in general. So if you are trying to build your platform and ultimately sell your books, you are definitely going to want to listen to this. But before we get into it with Eleanor, I want to tell you about the writing intensive of your dreams. It's called New Year's Newsletter and Pitch Party Extravaganza. It's every day in January, and it is guaranteed to revolutionize your writing practice. You will write over 22,000 words. I have already taught 3 cohorts, and my students have been freaking crushing it. 2 of them recently got bylines in the New York Times. They've also gotten bylines in Slate, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post. It's amazing. So if you are interested in joining in on the fun and up-leveling your own writing practice and, hey, landing those dream bylines, let's be honest, head on over to my website. It is courtneykosak.com/teaching. Again, Courtney Kosak, last name KOCAK.com/teaching, and you can use code BLEEDERS for $100 off. Okay, let's dive in with Eleanor.
Hi, my name is Eleanor Whitney, and I'm the author of Promote Your Book. I'm a marketer, editor, writer, and musician. I'm also the author of Riot Woman and Quit Your Day Job, and I work in my day job as a content marketer and strategist for tech companies.
You have published 3 books. So before we get into the tips for how to promote your book, give us like your top line advice on just how to get published in the first place. What's your publishing philosophy on like big press, indie, self-publishing? How do you think about it?
It's a great question. Getting published is hard. My background is that I started with self-publishing. I was a zine maker, and then later dabbled in blogging back when that was a thing. So I think, first of all, it's about really deciding what you have to say and why you're the person to say it, and what is the ideas that are like clawing to get out of you. Because no matter what route you take, publishing is hard and publishing takes a long time. And even if you can just throw something on the internet, it takes a long time to build an audience and community. So you need to love what you're doing, which doesn't mean it's the thing you have to do forever.
Yes.
So what is that idea that you just feel is so important to share with the world? Because your passion will carry you through when it gets hard. And then I do think it really is knowing your audience, knowing who is the people that are consuming what you have to say and where are they finding this information. So that might help think about what might be most quote unquote appropriate. You know, if you are writing racy sci-fi romance, there's a huge community of self-publishers there. So that might be a great place to go. But you want to know that community before you decide that's where you're going all in on. You know, if you're publishing literary essays, you might need to build yourself through like the Lit Mag kind of MFA. You don't need an MFA. I should say that.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm getting an MFA and you don't need one.
You don't need one. I also have one. Love it. But it won't necessarily help you get published.
No.
Okay. So again, just knowing like where you want to go and what do you need from your publisher and understanding that first. So if you want your book in stores and you're working with an indie publisher, make sure they have distribution and that they're selling your books for you. Or, you know, if you're self-publishing, are you willing to go and carry it around to the different places and be like, hi, can you put my book on consignment? So really just knowing that I'm unagented, that's my next project. I'm published with an independent publisher and I'm looking to go with my next book, which is a little more literary, a little more to a larger independent publisher or perhaps a major publisher, still figuring that out. But again, knowing what is right for the book you're writing and the ideas you care about is generally my philosophy. And also, where is your community going? Because community is what's going to carry your books forward.
Yes, I am definitely noticing a theme with you after our conversation for Private Parts Unknown. Community is huge for you. I would like to ask just one follow-up. So do you feel in retrospect, looking back on the books that you have published, are you glad you took the path that you did?
I think that it was the right path for me as a writer at the time. I really credit my publisher, Microcosm, with helping me understand what it is to publish a book.
Mm-hmm.
Like me, they started in zines and they were like a zine distributor before they started putting out books. So they understood that pipeline really well. And like they were the ones who taught me how to write a book proposal and that's the thing you needed. And when you might need an agent as a nonfiction writer and when you don't. So if you're doing more how-to books, you don't necessarily need an agent. So just lessons like that I think not every writer gets taught. So I'm extremely grateful for that. I think for my book, Riot Woman, it could have been a different book if it was with a more like literary publisher, but we went more of the cultural criticism route and less the like memoir essay route. And in retrospect, I think maybe I'll have another book of like memoir essays about feminism in the 90s, but maybe that wasn't the time for it. So I think that I'm grateful for what I've learned, but I do think, again, I didn't really know what my goals were other than to like, I'm going to have a book out, which felt great. But also that can be a red flag for folks. Like if you are just like, I want a book out and I don't care how I get it, I would be like, slow down. But I'm very grateful. Like, again, Microcosm has good distribution. They have a great sales team. They work really hard. So like, I never had to worry about my book being in stores or people not being able to get it. And like with indie press, that is not always a given. So I would just say, talk to your friends, talk to other authors. If you're not sure and you're talking to a press and you don't have like an agent or someone to help you negotiate, ask if you can talk to other authors on that press and do a contract review with a lawyer, someone like the Authors Guild if you can. I worked in the artist services for a long time, so I feel like I can read a basic contract, but it never hurts. All these things because you're like, it's cool. And then later you might be like, it's not cool.
Yeah. That's really good advice. I just have one thought. First of all, I love Riot Woman and I love the criticism aspect. I do think you could do a Chelsea Hodson and like she had Pity the Animal and then turned it into Tonight I'm Someone Else. You could basically add, 30,000 words of memoir and turn it into a different book. Just saying.
Do I have that on my computer? Only time will tell. Only time will tell, And I think now it's like I would be grateful for the perspective I could add. So maybe that'll be a project down the line. Thank you for saying that. That's
perfect. Yes. Okay. Manifesting here too. Okay. So you wrote the book on it, how to promote your book. Your book is packed with helpful guidance, but let's boil it down for the purposes of this podcast into like a top 5. So like a friend comes to you and they're like, I got to promote my book. Can you just give me your 5 best tips? What would you say?
So, I'm a marketer by trade. I like to tell people and a community builder and an educator at the end of the day. So I love a 5-step process. So, if I were talking to kindergartners, I'd be like, okay, we're going to do 5 things. But actually, you might actually only do 3.
Oh, okay.
Because that's about, but the 5 things I think, step 0, write your book and write the book that you want to write. Of course, there's going to be many inputs, whether if you have an agent, editors, publisher, they're all going to weigh in. But first and foremost, write your book. Write the book that you care about, that you feel the world needs to see, that you have to offer. And while you're writing the book, build community, find people similar to you. They don't have to be exactly the same. Go to their events, go support them, start to figure out what the universe that your book exists in looks like.
Yes.
And that's when you can also, I don't know, start spreadsheets of events you think are cool, of places you like. Notice where people you like are getting covered, who's covering them, who's writing about them. If you can, write all this down or bookmark it in your browser, whatever works for you to come back to. It's okay if you forget about it, you'll come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of step 0 and 1. So write your book, understand the community and the universe your book exists in. When the book is coming out, like you have a publication date, that's when you want to start working backwards.
Okay.
And so if you have like a year, great. But I would say 6 months to a year is awesome. Even if you have 3 months, I guess that's all right. You're going to feel a little squeezed, but start thinking about, okay, when is the book going to hit the shelves? When is it available for pre-order? When will I know what the cover is? When do I need to send it out for reviews? Where am I going to send it? Who's doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Like thinking backwards can be really helpful because some places are like, yeah, we only want to review books, that are just out. Some other places, maybe smaller lit mags, they don't care so much. But thinking, what are my top places, again, that exist in this universe of books? So making a work back timeline, as we might say in event management, I think can be really helpful. Once you have that general idea, so, write your book, find your community, make kind of a general plan, thinking about what you want to do. Some books maybe might tend more to live events and online workshops, especially just like a how-to book.
Yeah.
If it's a poetry collection, you might be looking more at like readings, maybe a workshop, especially if you did go to an MFA program or involved in teaching or poetry community stuff. But thinking about what is appropriate for your book because you can't do everything. So thinking about your general plan, what you want, when you want to do it, and then starting to narrow down onto what works for this book. What do I really want to do? What's really important to me? Is it really important to me to have like a splashy launch event at the coolest bookstore? Or do I just want to do online events because, my community is more comfortable doing that? That's what fits in my time frame. So I'm going to do a bunch of smaller events. Thinking about that so you can start thinking about planning them. So once you have your big idea, then sort of focus on what's appropriate for your book and then start, with the logistics, the planning, the outreach, things like that. And then I think once you start going to that, your book comes out, the sort of last step I'd say is just to stop and reflect. Maybe you do a wave of events right up to and right after the book comes out. And then you sort of say, what worked? What are people responding to? What's feeling good to me? What are some gaps I could address? And then you might want to do more events, or maybe you want to pitch different pieces that are related to your book or what you talk about in your book. I mean, we haven't talked about pitching. I feel like I've lost my clear 5 steps, but it's really just about knowing your community, knowing the universe of your book, and then knowing what's right for your book, and then making that happen, and then reflecting on where else you can go to extend the life of your book. The cool thing about books is they don't go away.
Yeah.
You may hear these things of like, oh my God, did you hit the bestseller list? And like fiction, you only have a month to promote it. This is not true anymore. Like actually books have, a longer shelf life. So you can give yourself the grace of promoting it for a longer time too. I recently interviewed this author, Kristen Felicetti, for The Rumpus. Her book, Log Off, which is a fiction book that came out on an indie press, came out earlier this year. She's still getting interviews published. Yeah. She's still doing events. And I think that is a really good example of like, you don't just need to make a splash and go away. You can just be consistent.
That's, yes, such a good message. And I want to end on digging a little deeper into the outreach. And I want to offer something I've noticed that I think is really great. And then you can riff on this, but I've had a few people that, instead of just pitching me to come on my podcast about their new book in advance, and I don't know how conscious this is, they could just like the podcast, whatever, but in advance, not like the day before, but like weeks, sometimes even months in advance, they will have posted about the podcast. They will have listened to the podcast, and they will have tweeted or whatever, tagging me, commenting on a certain episode. And I just have to say that is so much more effective. These people were a good fit anyway. I probably would have said yes anyway, but it just came with the correct energy of like, sometimes somebody will pitch me and it'll be a bullshit, I love your podcast. And it's like, I don't think you do. Or it'll be like a really forced takeaway or whatever. I would way rather hear from someone that they can just say, I love the podcast, because I already know they have listened and they do. So yeah, your thoughts on that, and then anything you'd like to add for outreach tips.
Yeah, I think that's a great example and a great tip. And also just in thinking about, because your time and energy for outreach is finite, finding the things that are a fit where you're more likely to get the yes and that feel authentic to you. I mean, it's fun to find people that you like, and it feels better, because I think so many people get the ick about marketing, or they feel like they're bothering people by asking about their book, and they're just like, hey, remember about my book? Can you talk about, no, they like changing the mindset and being like, oh, this is so exciting because I have something that's a fit for this person whose project I admire. I mean, how awesome. What an opportunity for both of you. And that means you're not a fit for everyone, right? So I think finding those folks, and again, you can do that engagement early when you're still writing your book. And yeah, maybe you strategically post about it before you pitch.
Not offended if it is strategic. Not offended.
Yeah.
I love when someone tweets about my show, even if they just want to come on my show. I don't care.
Yeah, totally. Like, flattery is great and most everybody likes it, right? So, but be sincere, right?
Yes.
And do your research, which is exactly what you said. It's not this empty, like, isn't it so great? Reference something specific they did. Did they do an event in your town? Do they have a poem that you really like or that meant something to you? Tell them.
Yeah.
I think something also is that we feel, especially if someone's a gatekeeper in some way or more maybe influential than us, oh, like they don't need my feedback. Like they hear it all the time. Like, actually, people don't. And when it's thoughtful, it's meaningful. So it may not work 100% of the time, but at worst, you've told someone you admire that you like them, and that's never a bad thing. And it's often funny, right, how that can come around for later. So maybe it isn't the right time now, but starting to build that relationship can really be helpful for the next book, or, when your paperback comes out, if you released a hardcover or whatever it is. So playing the long game, I think, is really important, but it's really hard sometimes because we're like, please pay attention to my book now.
Yes, but it goes back to exactly what you've been talking about with community. It's like, these are actually relationships. And so if you are fostering your networking, treating them like real relationships, which they are. Some of my best friends have come out of these kind of interactions. Then you are actually just building community. And that's the best way to promote your book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be my conclusion too. And, not everyone has to be your best friend, but I think it's like pleasantly surprising about what does come out and who stays with you. And honestly, at the end of the day, writing can feel really solitary and really lonely. So building those relationships to me feels like such a reward for this sort of solitary labor. So remembering that too, that these are, as writers, we need our time that's thoughtful and internal, but then we also need readers and community to bring our work to life. And that is the fun part about promoting your book. So it's nice to have that balance. And remember, you're not going to always be doing one or the other. So it isn't forever. So to see it as an opportunity and like cherish that opportunity to build those relationships, I just think is the best part about book promotion.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Bleeders. Writing is so much better with friends. I'm your host, Courtney Kosak, and hey, let's connect on social media. I am at Courtney Kosak, last name Kocack, on Twitter and Instagram. And make sure you're signed up for the Bleeders Companion Substack for all kinds of newsletter exclusives. There's also a link for that in the episode description. I actually recently launched a paid subscription where I'm going to be taking you behind the scenes of all of my best bylines. And I just published a post about my return to stand-up comedy and how I got ready for my first show. I freaking crushed it. So super fun stuff happening over there and super fun stuff happening over here. I've got another great episode for you next week. So join me again next time for another instructive episode. In the meantime, happy bleeding.